Hi, good morning, everyone. I apologize, I'm a few minutes late. This is Raul Harad, CEO of DeepSafe, and we're here in our usual stream just to discuss informally happenings in the crypto world and what's going on with DeepSafe. Of course, like always, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them on the chat and we'll address them as we go along. The first thing I wanted to talk about, which I think is a very important development when it comes to the crypto world in the last few weeks, is the institutional adoption and stablecoins movements. I discussed in the last stream how we're keeping an eye out for ETF applications from Ethereum, from Solana, and from a few other coins after the surge we've seen in Bitcoin once the ETFs were approved. And of course, what that does is it allows institutional investors to enter the market. Before the ordinance, of course, the problem we had was that um, it didn't meet risk management procedures and it wasn't compliant with most of the institutional adopters' regulations, internal regulations for investment. And so, what we've seen recently is an acceleration in institutional adoption. We see this particularly with BlackRock, which, as you know, is one of the largest, if not the largest, hedge fund in the world, who has been leading the charge by considering tokenized ETFs, and especially, as I mentioned, on public blockchains, excuse me, such as Ethereum. Now, this initiative, which is why I mentioned it last time, could dramatically change the ETF settlement times. We would enable 24/7 trading. It would broaden access to traditional assets worldwide. And in fact, BlackRock uh, has a tokenized money market fund. They've called it BUIDL, so build but with the L and the D um, inverted. So I guess we would say vital. Uh, and it's now the largest of its kind. It's about $2.2 billion in terms of assets under management. And they've really laid the groundwork for the tokenization of real world asset funds, which we discussed a couple of streams ago. And so by shifting ETF shares to the blockchain, investors could benefit from instant settlements. They could also partake in things like fractional ownership, and this would considerably lower the costs. So it would increase access, which we know increases adoption. And so this is one of the trends that we're looking out for as we move forward. Another major asset management that has thrown their hat into the ring in terms of the ETFs is Franklin Templeton, which, as you know, is one of the largest asset managers in the US. They have signaled a widespread institutional pivot towards blockchain rails. This, of course, is a major, major development. Ethereum is at the center of this movement, seeing about $3.9 billion of institutional inflows, excuse me, in August alone. So $3.9 billion in just the month of August. This actually outpaced Bitcoin, and with BlackRock itself channeling, as I mentioned, $3.4 billion into ETH, it really underscores the narrative of the shift from Bitcoin being digital gold to Ethereum being digital oil. And so the settlement layer powering tokenization, stablecoins, and DeFi, um, is being set up for institutions now. When it comes to stablecoins, we've also seen a big gain, particularly when it comes to regulatory clarity. Uh, Australia has introduced new distribution exemptions for providers, supporting innovation payments in DeFi. In parallel, we've seen XRP continue to develop cross-chain and staking solutions with yields around 6 to 8%. So bridging um, decentralized finance, DeFi, and traditional finance, TradFi, a lot closer. I also mentioned last time we've had, of course, the Genius Act in the U.S. in terms of regulation, and we've had the regulation also clarity with MICAs in Europe. And starting August 1st, Hong Kong started with their stablecoin ordinance, which came into effect. It's pretty straightforward. I've actually read the whole ordinance and the new law. And really, what it does is it captures the essence of the issuance of stable coins. There are some requirements. Of course, the company has to be registered in Hong Kong. The CEO, the stablecoin manager, and certain key positions have to reside in Hong Kong, of course. And there are some requirement when it comes to liquidity as well as liquidity pool management. In terms of upcoming events and key themes to look out for, the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index and the upcoming PCE inflation report are going to be key macro events, and they're likely going to drive volatility into the crypto prices this week. Bitcoin and Ethereum both facing the largest ever options expiration this Friday, with billions of dollars at stake. And Max Pain price focusing markets are expectations of around $110,000 per Bitcoin and around $3,700 per Ethereum. If we look at it now, let me just look up the price of Ethereum real quick. We are at 6,356. And so basically what this means is on Friday, Ethereum could go from 6,300 to about 3,700. So just keep an eye out for that. It is, of course, a big jump, but that is to be expected when the volatility of the market increases, as I mentioned, due to the release of these indicators, but also because of the largest ever options expiration. And again, this happens this Friday. In terms of spot crypto ETFs, especially for Solana and XRP, they're on the verge, as I mentioned, of launching under new SEC rules, which would, of course, legitimize not only the coin themselves, but crypto as an asset class in general. It would open the door for broader participation by institutional investors. We've seen FTX's schedule of 1.6 billion repayment to creditors by the end of September will, of course, influence liquidity dynamics and market sentiment. So again, the money from FTX, for those of you that remember, the exchange that went bust and that subsequently landed their leaders in prison, has to do some reparation damages, and they are due um, this month, at the end of this month. And that's about $1.6 billion that will enter in terms of liquidity. Um, we also have some other macro factors. Actually, before I even move on to that, let me talk a little bit about um, the regulatory side. So the SEC and the CFTC have been working towards streamlining oversight of DeFi reporting. The idea is to expand trading exemptions, which suggests that both innovation and compliance will remain a major theme throughout the last quarter of the year. As you know, and as you've heard me speak before, I am a major proponent of regulation. I like having the rules clear. I like knowing exactly um, what are the rules we have to abide by. And so, while some like a lack of regulation because it's a more lax environment, I prefer to make sure that the government gives guidelines of what is allowed and what is not. It makes life easier, particularly for developers when you are working on a build, because they might build something that later on will not be compliant, and that would require them to go revise the code, change their DApp if possible, and try to adapt it to new regulation. So the clearer the regulation, the better it is for everyone. the more it legitimizes, of course, what we're doing. Now, in terms of macro factors and economic drivers, there are some macro forces that remain a critical backdrop for crypto. We've seen the Federal Reserve policy moves, especially the new Chair Powell's anticipated comments that will set a tone for risk assets, including digital currencies. The US dollar index is showing bullish momentum, with traditional puts pressure on Bitcoin and altcoins as liquidity shifts towards safer assets. So, in layman terms, what does that mean? It means that the dollar index is showing that the dollar will go up. And when that happens, usually people will shy away from um, more or riskier assets towards safer assets because it is a time of high volatility. And so that is something that we expect. It's something that, as you know, happens every time there is an event that increases volatility in the markets. But that is something that obviously you can hedge against. Um, but it is something to look out for. So we'll have a combination of factors with liquidity entering the market, particularly if Solana and Ethereum ETFs are approved. But we will have some macro indicators from the US, which, as we know, can shift the market considerably. We've seen an upward movement with gold in tandem with the crypto sell off. So, this underscores what I just mentioned, which is the risk off mood. So, people are offloading from crypto and unloading into gold, which is obviously considered a safer asset. But this is also part of the rotation into traditional havens with amid or havens amid the regulatory and macro uncertainty. So the interplay among inflation expectations, asset flows, and regulatory developments stand to keep the crypto market high, reactive over the coming weeks. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Um, each of these segments, of course, reveals that growing interconnectedness between legacy finance and crypto is so important. We have institutions, we have regulation, we have global macro events, which are now playing a pivotal role in shaping the future of the blockchain environment. All of these are events to keep an eye out for, and of course, these are things that will affect the movement of crypto prices. Um, Please keep in mind everything that I'm talking about is for informational purposes only. This is not financial advice. You should always do your own research. I know that some of you are very eager to have a bit more information about the listing of the token. We actually had a big roundtable with KOLs this week in China, and we shared with them some messages that they will be sharing with you in the next few days. But I can anticipate for those of you who are um, on this stream that the listing will happen in the next 2 months. We're looking ideally at end of October. That's the deadline we're managing. But as I had mentioned in the past, sometimes this is just not up to us. And so what that does is it forces us to just have to sit and wait until this happens. We're hoping this will happen soon. The final snapshot will happen as soon as we have the listing date, which will define how things move forward. So I thank you all for your patience. I know it's been a long journey. As I have explained in the past, you know, sometimes the deadlines are not up to us, and so we depend on third parties doing their due diligence, whether it be financial due diligence, legal due diligence, accounting due diligence, etc. Um, we are bound by those times, and so unfortunately, there is nothing that we can do, but it is coming. The other thing, of course, is the event with OKX. Oh, and sorry, one more thing I can tell you about the listing is that we will be listing in tier one and tier two markets. or centralized exchanges. But the main TGE will happen in one of the top tier um, centralized exchanges. And so we've really thrived, as we have always in the past, for the best, just to make sure that um, DeepSafe has the positioning and the credibility in the market that it deserves. So that's one big announcement. As I mentioned, there are some key opinion leaders that will be reaching out to you, sharing a little bit more information that they worked on in an offline workshop in China. And so this should have a considerable effect on the information that you have and give you a little bit of clarity on the timeline. However, I want to remain clear that none of these dates are set in stone because, as I said, unfortunately, not everything is up to us. We have done from our side everything that was required to do. Um, then the other thing that we discussed with some of the influencers who were at the meeting, the offline meeting this week, um, was related to the uh, the product and ecosystem development. So, is when we look back, we've always focused on refining our core technology, product architecture, and we've really achieved some strong results. And with the support of the community, which is you guys, we've gradually established the initial shape of our product and ecosystem. Moving forward, these are our three priorities. Number one, continuous product optimization, so delivering a more convenient and secure environment for our users. Number two is expanding our ecosystem applications, so encouraging more developers and getting more partners to join us. And number three is a global strategic layout, so ensuring DeepSafe achieves adoption and application on a much larger scale. And on this point, I'll also share with you that our Git book has all the information and a lot more details on not only the accomplishments to date, but also more details on our plans for the future. So with that, I'll leave you all. Thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate you guys being here with me, and I will see you again in a couple of days. As always, please don't hesitate to reach out to our team if you have any questions, if there's anything you would like for me to discuss during the streams. And of course, if there is any other issues or topics that you'd like to address. We'll do our best to share with you all the information that we have and that we are allowed legally. As you know, we have to sign sometimes NDAs that make it so that we can't share information until the events happened, but we're always happy to share with you guys information as it becomes available. So stay tuned to our official channels. And of course, as I said, don't hesitate to reach out, ask questions, check out the documents that I mentioned in Gitbook and of course on our website, as we will be updating them um, on a regular basis as information becomes available. So thank you all. I will see you in a couple of days, and I wish you all a good day, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, wherever you are. And I look forward to seeing you again. Bye.